So we're now at a time when industrial farming practices, they've degraded our soil, they've polluted our water, they've lowered the nutritional value of our food. Regenerative agriculture can rebuild the soil and vastly improve its ability to absorb and retain water. This makes crops less vulnerable to droughts and floods, and especially it sequesters a large amount of carbon into a healthy living soil. Now tonight, Don Viecelli, who chairs the Chicago chapter's Regenerative Agriculture campaign, will provide us with an introduction to the topic, its importance, the Farm Bill, and what we can do to help. So, Don, it's all yours. The screen is yours.
Well, thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure for me to be here to present. This presentation I put together some time ago. It's been modified several times, but I did get most of it at the last Soil Health Week event that was sponsored by the Illinois Stewardship Alliance. Maybe you're familiar with that group, but we partner with them and we respond when they put out action alerts, etc. So the presentation, by the way, is based on about 3 years of research and learning. When I started this project, I knew nothing about regenerative agriculture, even though I was raised on a farm. So it was all new to me. The slides will present a lot of information, some in detail. I'll answer all the questions that you have at the end. But most of it is based on serious scientific research and actual field trials, which I'll point out in the presentation. The Chicago Metro chapter, of course, is a member of the Climate Reality Project. We have about 600 members, but only about 30 or so are really active and show up at our monthly meetings. We have monthly meetings like everybody else. And then some time ago, when I got first trained, I joined this chapter and got involved with several other committees. And one of them happened to be regenerative agriculture. All right, so thanks for this opportunity. This is titled Best Tool for Combating Climate Change. And I'll give you several reasons why in the slide presentation. My name is Don Viecelli. I'm a chairperson of our own Regenerative Agriculture Campaign Committee. We meet once a month. And as I said, we started back in 2021. Been working on it ever since. And then about 1.5 years ago, we needed a broader audience to get out the message on regenerative agriculture. So I started with a co-chair, Tom Thorpe out of Colorado. We put together regular monthly Zoom meetings on the Farm Bill. And up to this point, we've got about 30 plus chapters that have signed up, basically, that are either participating in their own committees or just have people involved on nature-based solutions, which is one of the primary topics or focus for CRP. So nature-based solutions is where regenerative agriculture fits in the overall scope of things. So we started a committee called the CRP Regenerative Agriculture Coalition. We have about 200 people on my distribution list. We have meetings on the second Thursday of every month. As a matter of fact, we had one today at 4 o'clock. We do it at 4 o'clock. And at the end of the meetings, they're recorded. They're posted. If you're interested in viewing some of the past meetings, they're posted on Reality Hub Nature-Based Solution. So let's see. Okay, I was a project leader. I was trained on that first virtual training session in 2020. I got interested in climate change and had no idea how involved it was going to be. You can contact me. I put my email in the chat. I'll review the chat messages afterwards, and I'll respond to any questions we may not be able to get to answer today. So today, I'm going to cover the list of topics in this presentation. I'm going to talk about climate change. It's undeniable, pretty much a fact now, wasn't really believed 3 years ago, at least caused by humans. The carbon cycle, I'll define that a little bit. I'll give a definition for regenerative agriculture, at least our definition, and I'll explain carbon sequestration in case you don't understand how that works. There's several RA principles and practices, and the reason why it's shifting the paradigm of farming. Benefits of RA, I will cover that. The pace of change, some tilling practices, and I'll briefly discuss explain in a few slides the Farm Bill and give you an update on what's happening there. And of course, what you can do to help. And then we'll have a time at the end for questions and answers. So my background, I was raised on a 160-acre family farm. It was a dairy farm in Weberville, Michigan, just outside of Lansing, Michigan, which is kind of in the central state. of part of the state. I retired in product marketing my whole life. Recently, I retired in 2015. So most of my experience was based in product marketing for data communications, telecommunications, cellular, and wireless internet companies in the Chicagoland area. I graduated from Michigan State University in advertising and marketing. I received an MBA from Lake Forest Graduate School of Management, a business school right here in the area. And then I retired, as I said, in 2015, and I'm very busy with my volunteer work, and I have a writing hobby. This was my family farm. I spent 10 years helping my parents farm the land using traditional farming practices. Organic farming was not known in our vocabulary. Regenerative agriculture practices were not known or practiced at the time. Farmers in this period, in the late 50s and 60s, would not have looked favorably upon any farmers trying to turn away from conventional farming practices. So this is my family farm around 1960. We had 160 acres that included around 30 acres of woods and wetland. My family actually moved from the suburb in Detroit, Michigan when I was a young boy in 1956. We raised milking cows, pigs, goats, horses. We planted corn, wheat, rye, oats, clover, or alfalfa for the cows. It was a traditional family farm with around 110 acres of tillable land, and the rest was wetlands and forest. I spent 10 years farming before leaving for college. I never thought I would be involved with farming again. And my parents, my father specifically, would be very amazed at what's happening in the farming communities today. There was no emphasis at all on regenerative farming practices as we know it today. Climate change was not on anyone's radar screen. Soil health was not the primary focus of farmers' concern at the time. Only how much yield per acre could be achieved on the land. This is the latest report from the UN's IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. States unequivocally that humans are the reason our climate is warming the planet. They call it a code red for humanity. This chart shows our average surface temperature has risen 1.2 degrees Celsius since 1850. The IPCC goal is to keep the temperature from rising over 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2025 to prevent irreversible climate change events. Carbon dioxide, CO2, emissions is the primary reason the atmosphere is warming. These levels have already risen to historic levels. This chart shows that CO2 levels were consistently in the 260 to 300 parts per million range over the last 800,000 years. This data is from an ice core samples that show historical CO2 concentration levels. Everything changed with the beginning of the industrial age, especially in the last 70 years since World War II. Here's another look at atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. Things changed dramatically after 1950. In 2013, CO2 levels surpassed 400 parts per million for the first time in recorded history. This graph shows even better how fast CO2 levels have risen since 1880. We averaged 315 parts per million of CO2 in our atmosphere in 1960. We reached a high of 424 parts per million in May of 2023. Since the industrial era began around 1750, CO2 concentrations have risen by about 50%. 20 of the hottest years on record have occurred since 2000. The four hottest were 2016, 2019, 2020, and 2023 was the hottest year yet. Greenhouse gases are measured in units called global warming potential, GWP. It measures how much heat each type of gas traps compared to carbon dioxide. Methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases trap much more heat than carbon dioxide. However, the other chart shows how much emissions of each type of gas is in our atmosphere. As you can see, carbon dioxide emits 76% of the gas in our atmosphere. I'd like to shift now and talk a little bit about the carbon cycle. About 200 billion metric tons of carbon move throughout the planet. This includes the atmosphere, biosphere, such as plants and animals, soil, and ocean. We have knocked the carbon cycle out of balance, mostly by burning fossil fuels, but many other things as well, such as poor farming practices, contribute to the problem. Nature uses photosynthesis to draw down excess carbon from our atmosphere. The lack of ground cover, deforestation, use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides, and other practices prevent nature from doing its job. Our soil can store up to 10 gigatons of carbon every year. This is an important thing to remember. 10 gigatons every year, if the soil is healthy. Currently, we are emitting 11 gigatons of excess CO2 each year due to poor soil practices. Here's a better look at the carbon storage capacity of our world. The atmosphere holds around 750 billion tons, that's gigatons, of carbon. The biosphere holds 550 billion tons. The soil holds 2,300 billion tons of carbon, 3 times as much as our atmosphere and 4 times as much as our biosphere. It is estimated that up to 900 gigatons of excess legacy carbon is currently in our atmosphere. Even if we reach net zero emissions by 2040, we still have all this legacy emissions to draw down to stop global warming effects. RA practices can help reduce this excess amount dramatically per several scientific sources, up to 80 gigatons, that's billions, or more per year, if RA practices are implemented worldwide. The primary reason is 1 gigaton of carbon sequestered in the soil can draw down 3.67 gigatons of CO2 from our atmosphere through photosynthesis. That's the potential of RA. So what is regenerative agriculture? Regenerative agriculture is a system of farming principles and practices that increase biodiversity, enriches soils, improves watersheds, and enhances the entire ecosystem of the farm. Through photosynthesis, carbon is captured in the soil by pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere to reverse the damages caused by climate change. It offers increased yields, resistance to climate instability, improves soil health, and many other benefits for farming and ranching communities. What is carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is the long-term removal or capture of carbon dioxide from our atmosphere to slow down or reverse atmospheric pollution and to mitigate or reverse global warming. Examples of carbon sequestration will follow. Let's start with regenerative agriculture. It tends to be governed by 5 basic principles. Minimum tillage to prevent erosion and build soil structure. Keep residue on soil to absorb moisture and protect the soil. Maintaining a living root system to absorb nutrients and feed microbes. Crop diversity using cover crops and crop rotation to maintain soil health. Integrating livestock to fertilize plants and provide nutritional food. Here's a quote from Zach Laughlin, 2020. The effect of practicing regenerative agriculture is that it restores soil health. For farmers, this means greater yields, the resiliency of the soils to various stresses like droughts and excess moisture, decreased need for outside input costs like fertilizer and pesticides, and increased profits. For consumers, increases in soil health lead to more nutrient-dense foods, a pollinator-friendly environment, wildlife habitats, erosion control, pollution runoff control, and carbon sequestration through photosynthesis, thus helping to reverse climate change. In short, it helps to solve many of the world's environmental problems. Regenerative agriculture includes these key agricultural practices. This includes things like crop rotation, no or low till plowing, use of cover crops, animal grazing, composting, agroforestry, and more. Through the practices of regenerative agriculture, the soil health can be restored, enabling a greater level of carbon sequestration to be achieved with the use of these agricultural practices. Some of these practices will also help to increase the soil's ability to sequester carbon on pasture land. Here's an example of carbon sequestration from growing cover crops. Cover crops are different from growing cash crops, sold for profit such as corn or soybeans. Cover crops are used to improve soil health by protecting from soil erosion and nutrient loss. Cover crops help control weeds, pests, and other diseases and hold more water in the soil. The right cover crop increases biodiversity and provides nutrients for plant growth without the need for chemical inputs like fertilizers. Here's an example of carbon sequestration from no-till farming practice. No-till plowing builds healthy soil that increases the amount of carbon sequestration and water absorption, leading to higher crop yields. Soil microorganisms thrive in healthy soil, which increases nutrient cycling, suppressing plant diseases to grow more nutrient-dense crops. When the soil is plowed, carbon is released into the atmosphere, increasing greenhouse gas emissions that warm the planet. This slide shows the type of tillage methods used by 70% of US farmers in 2017. No plowing was used on 30% of US cropland. Low-till, reduced plowing, was used on 35% of US cropland. Conventional plowing was used on 28% of US cropland. We need a higher percentage of farmers to practice no or low-tilling methods to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050 or sooner to mitigate climate change effects. No-till percentages were growing in the US. Companies such as Cargill are promoting adoption. Cargill plans to advance RA practices among row crops. They plan to implement RA on 10 million acres of farmland and ranch lands in North America by 2030. General Mills plans to advance RA practices on 1 million acres of farmland by 2030. Other food producers are planning similar programs. It is estimated that global food system accounts for about 33% of greenhouse gas emissions and 70% of water consumption. Here's another chart showing similar results we've discussed. Growth in low-till and no-till is growing steadily, especially in the coastal regions. As mentioned earlier, around 37% of tillable acreage in the US is no-tilled and 35% is reduced tillage. This chart shows the amount of land farmed organically in the world by region, farmed rather. It has grown tenfold since 1999. The farming culture is starting to change for the better. This chart actually shows how fast RA practices are growing worldwide. RA practices have increased 15% per year on average since 2008, or 93% over the last 10 years. This equals around 14.7% of total global cropland per a recent food and agricultural study. This is very good, but it must change even faster to stop climate change and reverse global warming by 2050. So, can we really reverse climate change with regenerative agriculture? The answer is yes. We can reverse climate change and stop global warming using nature's own solution for pulling CO2 out of our atmosphere. The solutions can be implemented today. We don't have to wait for technological solutions that are costly, mostly unproven, and potentially harmful to our environment. We can use nature's own solution. I will show you how this is done in the following slide. We do this by using soil as a carbon sink to pull down carbon dioxide from our atmosphere naturally. This is called carbon sequestration. This is a natural process that can restore balance and stop global warming. It is possible to pull down more carbon than we emit each year with the right land management practices. So how does carbon sequestration work? Plants draw down carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and pass the carbon sugar molecules through its root system. Soil carbon comes from organic matter decomposition, which if not covered is released back into the atmosphere. Soils store up to 3 times more carbon than exists in the atmosphere. Plants absorb atmospheric carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, returning plant residues into the soil, contributing to soil carbon. Much of this carbon ultimately returns to the atmosphere as soil microbes decompose, releasing carbon dioxide. Soil carbon stores can increase if the rate of carbon inputs exceeds the rate of microbial decomposition. Carbon sequestration reverses this process of storing carbon in soil organic matter and thus removing it from the atmosphere. So, maintaining living root systems are key to regenerative agriculture practices. Roots store carbon and feed the microorganisms that in turn provide nutrients for plants. Together, they build healthy soil, needed to regenerate the land and help mitigate global warming. How this works is explained in the next cycle. It's called, next slide, it's called the nutrient cycle. You've probably seen this on various websites. This is the nutrient cycle as defined by Dr. Elaine Ingham in Soil Food Web. Nature uses plant root systems to grow and feed microorganisms in healthy soil called soil organic matter, or SOM. This biology is what creates healthy soil to grow plants. There are three principles that need to be understood. One, nature exists as a series of relationships, with each organism playing a role, as shown in this slide. Two, nutrient cycling is key. Organisms consume what they need to live and grow, and changes nutrients into food sources, beneficial to other organisms. Three, diversity is key. Different organisms cycle nutrients for each predator or prey. The whole system is needed to maintain the soil food web. You can find this on Dr. Ingham's site. She has a lot of case studies also. This is a very good site. I use this all the time. And if you get an opportunity, tune into one of her free webinars. So healthy soil is approximately 45% minerals, 25% water, 25% air, and 5% organic matter. Microorganisms require air and water to survive and grow to feed plants and build healthy soil. Plowing destroys the structure needed for microorganisms and results in compacted dirt that cannot absorb water or prevent soil erosion and pollution runoff. Building healthy soil is the key to regenerative agriculture practices. Now that we know how carbon is stored on our planet, we can turn our attention to the conditions of our topsoil and how farmers can benefit from implementing RA practices. First, here are some facts. The Midwest Corn Belt farmland has lost a third of its carbon-rich topsoil through erosion. Generating 3 centimeters of topsoil takes nature up to 1,000 years. Only 60 years of farming left if soil degradation continues for a UN official. About a third of the world's soil has already been degraded per the Food and Agricultural Organization. This slide shows the extent of the degradation in the world. 3.2 billion people are suffering now. Agriculture needs to close the 11 gigaton, remember that, the 10 gigaton? We need to close the 11 gigaton gap between carbon emissions and CO2 drawdown to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. Regenerative agriculture practices can easily achieve this goal if healthy soil farming practices are implemented by all farmers and ranchers. This slide shows what regenerative agriculture does. It shifts the paradigm. Instead of competing with nature, we partner with nature. We stop using conventional, industrial, or factory farming methods that rely on monoculture crops, synthetic fertilizers, and deforestation to feed animals. All of this is causing desertification of our topsoil at a rate that will result in the loss of 2/3 of our landmass to deserts by 2100. We need to cover the soil when not in use. Now we can turn to the benefits of regenerative agriculture, not only to farmers and ranchers, but for the world. Here's benefit number 1. RA can decrease greenhouse gas emissions. RA is a key solution to combating climate change. Agriculture alone is directly responsible for about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. Together with all land and food production, RA accounts for around 25% of greenhouse gases. We currently release 43 to 50 gigatons, that's billions, of CO2 into our atmosphere each year. Studies have shown that implementing RA practices can pull down or sequester up to 37.7 or more tons of CO2 per hectare per year. That's equal to 15.3 tons per acre per year. If only 5 to 10% of worldwide farmers practice RA, we can sequester more than 100%. That's 45.12 gigatons versus the 43 gigatons of the carbon we release into our atmosphere each year. If 100% of farmers practiced RA, we can effectively sequester more than 80 gigatons of carbon per year. Benefit number 2. RA has the potential to reverse climate change. If we can decrease the amount of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere each year, we can potentially reverse climate change. There is another study by the Rodell Institute on the effectiveness of RA practices. The vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions come from carbon dioxide, around 38 out of 55 gigatons per year. Regenerative grazing systems, that's animal grazing systems, and cropping, that's row crop, well, it's cropping systems alone can draw down 55 gigatons of CO2 each year if practiced globally. So on the right or on the left is the global CO2 emissions. And these two practices alone, according to the Rodell Institute, through their field trials, can exceed that amount, which would help us reach net zero very quickly. Benefit number 3, RA improves yields and nutrition. These results per acre are based on farm trials by the Rodell Institute in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, over decades of testing. Farm yields using no-till, which is no plowing, practices are competitive or better than conventional till plowing methods after a 5-year transition period. However, in extreme weather conditions, organic systems out-yield conventional up to 40%, using 45% less energy and releasing 45% fewer carbon emissions. So this is a comparison. Conventional is over here. No-till with organic legumes, a little higher. But with organic manure, and even if you use some of the more like Dr. Ingram's composting techniques, it would be even better. Benefit number 4, RA produces greater profits for farmers. This area in the white are the profit margins under conventional and regenerative. This study of 20 farms showed that although crop yields were lower by 29%, at least initially, RA systems had 70% higher profits in conventional methods. The main reason for increased profits was due to using less inputs, such as seed and fertilizer. Other benefits include increased soil organic matter and diversity of insects that decrease the number of harmful pests, leading to stronger crops. Benefit number 5, RA creates drought and flood resistant soil. Soil organic matter determines the rate and quantity of surface water infiltration to reduce runoff and soil erosion during extreme weather conditions. Each 1% of soil organic matter holds up to 20,000 gallons more water per acre. Most farmland today only average less than 3 to 4% share of soil organic matter. This has caused severe soil erosion and fertilizer runoff pollution in many states. This makes it difficult to prevent crop loss during droughts and floods. Because the soil is so compacted, it is estimated with the current studies I've seen that 50% of all the fertilizer they put on the farmland is not used by the plants and runs off into our streams and lakes and waterways. Benefit number 6, RA nurtures biodiversity. Biodiversity is fundamental to agriculture production and food security. The lack of biodiversity has resulted in reliance on monoculture crops that are highly susceptible to hot weather events, disease, and pests, as well as the loss of insects such as bees that are needed to pollinate our crops. Just as important is the loss of microbes in our soil that are needed to create healthy soils, plants, and animals. Last but not least, RA protects our waterways. RA practices increase water retention and decreases runoff pollution. Clean water is one of the biggest environmental priorities of the world today. Industrial agriculture is producing crisis-level runoff pollutions that are devastating to our rivers, streams, and oceans. The Mississippi River watershed crosses 22 states and carries nitrogen and phosphorus pollution runoff all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, where it has created one of the largest toxic dead zones in the world, 6,334 square miles. All right, let's turn our attention to the Farm Bill. So what is the Farm Bill? This is a quote from Regenerate America campaign website. They are part of Kiss the Ground's coalition to promote new policies for the Farm Bill. The 2024 Farm Bill covers many different areas of legislation dealing with the agricultural system. The Farm Bill is one of the most important pieces of legislation passed by Congress. The total estimated cost of the new Farm Bill may be around $500 billion over 5 years, over $1.3 trillion over 10 years. It is renewed every 5 to 7 years. The next update is this year, if we're lucky. Right now, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Farm Bill is composed of 12 titles or areas as shown in this chart. The Chicago Metro Chapter, Regenerative Agriculture Campaign Committee, and the Climate Reality Project, Regenerative Agriculture Coalition have created 6 policy recommendations for this Farm Bill that deal with several of these areas or titles. Climate Reality Project leaders and chapter members have held several meetings with congressional staff members of Congress advocating for these RA and agroforestry policies. We hope Congress adds climate smart agriculture policies to the new Farm Bill that reduce greenhouse gas emissions each year to help reverse global warming. Here are our top reasons for adding regenerative agriculture policies to the Farm Bill. Implement climate smart policies to mitigate climate change and meet UN emission reduction goals. Stop industrial farming practices that are degrading our topsoil, polluting our rivers, lakes, and oceans. Help farmers and ranchers reduce input costs and increase profits. Increase crop yields in extreme weather conditions. Increase nutrient values in our food supply. Greatly reduce CO2 emissions by sequestering more carbon in our soil than we release into our atmosphere each year. All of these are important to us. We need to stop the current farming practices that are harming our environment and emphasize the great potential of sequestering carbon back into our soil to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2040 or sooner. We can do all of this with the new Farm Bill. So what can you do to help? You can promote RA solutions to build healthy soil and biodiversity. You can join our CRP RA Coalition movement to participate in events. I mentioned it's held, we have meetings every month. You can join other RA organizations to promote RA practices through action alerts and advocacy efforts. You can work to create awareness of RA's potential to combat climate change. You can meet with Ag Committee members and members of Congress to advocate for climate smart farm bills. You can buy organic food products, support organic farmers. With your help, we can make a real difference. Here is a campaign that we have started. Actually, we did our first mailing in February of this year to over 543 farmers, which we had found a list for. The Climate Reality Project Coalition started a new campaign reaching out to farmers and ranchers to gather perspectives on agricultural policies that are shaping the future of farming and ranching. We are asking them to fill out a short questionnaire. It takes a few minutes, but their responses will be invaluable. We're interested in their views on conservation agriculture, soil management techniques, and the potential impacts of these new policies on their farm or ranch. We're asking farmers and ranchers to tell their success stories using RA practices to members of Congress regarding the Farm Bill and funding in the Inflation Reduction Act. It will help us advocate more effectively for policies that support farmers and the environment. Feel free to pass on this survey to any farmers and ranchers who would like to participate. I do have a link for the survey. I can send it to all of you as well. If you'd like a copy, put it in the chat and I'll save that. This campaign is ongoing through April. The goal was to meet Senator Debbie Stabenow's request to find stories that we can send and support and advocate to moderate Republican members of Congress. And so we have a whole campaign geared to that topic. So anyways, that's it. Thank you. This opportunity completes my presentation. Best tool for combating climate change. I can take questions now. And if not, leave it in the chat and I'll make a copy and I'll get back to you. And also in the chat, I give you my email so you can contact me directly. So thank you very much. I think I'll stop the share, right? And if you guys want to ask any questions, you can.
Let's start by giving it on a big hand. This is a great presentation. Hey, thank you.
You know, it's a lot of information. The presentation is available. I do have in my speaker talking points the citations. We have basically all the scientific proof and research that can back up the statements that are in that presentation. So I guess I can just go to those who have hands up. Andy Johnson, you're on my top right corner. Go ahead.
First, I have to say go green.
Go white.
Excellent.
I see
Good
that.
to see. Yeah, I had to go run and get it. So my questions are really about the current state of cover crops and low-till, no-till. I noticed that your data kind of ends around 2018. And during the pandemic, part of the USDA risk management group started incentivizing no-till, low-till, and cover crops. And I know that's tracked by the FSA locally. I wonder if you can comment on what that change has been, because I think if you sign up for a 3-year program, that you get like $80 an acre for low-till and planting clover as a cover crop. So can you tell me those incentives that are currently available? Has there been a market change in cover crop planting and use of low-till techniques?
Yeah, I guess you're referring to money provided by the USDA through the Farm Bill.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So right, there's two programs, right? And
right,
and there's also state like Illinois has a program, Iowa has a program, Missouri has a program. There are state programs that are beyond the pandemic program that came out of risk management in USDA.
Yeah, I have a couple answers to that. One, there wasn't enough money. The money was used up right away. About up to 60% or more that applied for this fund to do those kind of things did not get it, was not approved because there wasn't enough money in the Farm Bill or even in the IRA. They need more money. The other thing is the amount. I wasn't aware that it's up to $80 or so for cover crops.
Yeah. So yeah, you have to do both. Sorry to interrupt, but you have to do both. You have to do low-till and cover crop and commit to 3 years, and it's $80 an acre. And that was that. And I'll just tell you, that's in 2024 being offered by FSA right now.
Yeah, the problem is, as I said, there wasn't enough funds, and I think the majority money went to large industrial farms, nothing for small, medium farms. That's one problem. I know that there's still programs available for, is it cover crops? No, it's $5 an acre for planting cover crops. No, what do you do after you cut the crops down? Yeah, cover the land. It's only $5 per acre is what I heard for using cover crops. And that's not enough either. But the percentages of this have really dramatically improved since 2017. Actually, today, I got a report that was done by McKinsey and Company. And the numbers up over 70% that are doing no-till or low-till. So they're doing it, they're trying it. But the one big point of this report, which has a lot of great information, I'll have to send you the report, a link to it. It's the best I've seen. It covers a lot of different areas except for agroforestry and animal grazing, but all the percentages are there and why they're doing it and the barriers. But I forgot I was going to, the big problem was they just, farmers won't do it unless they get incentives from the government. Basically, is what's going to happen. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and that's my point is with incentives, it seems like there's a better path to this for farmers. Thank you.
Farmers won't do it without getting the money to pay for it because there is a transition period, as I pointed out, up to 3 years, basically. There's another great study, though, a report that came from Rick Clark out of Indiana. He saved $2 million over since he's converted. He does no fertilizer, basically. That was very influential too. I passed that out to all our members. Let me move on. Timothy, you're back in my right-hand corner. Your hand up. You have a question?
I want to say welcome, Don. Thanks for taking your time to transport your Zoom self to Minnesota. You're actually quite handsome for a Michigan farmer.
Hey, it's genetics.
Okay. So
my dad was the real farmer. He's the one. We actually he started in 1956 He
Wow.
died in 2012, and then we just sold the last pieces of the land in 2021. So we're out of farming.
My wife family has a 200-acre farm in Monticello, Minnesota.
Huh?
But I wanted to make a couple points. One on the progress or lack thereof. Well, first off, as you know, agriculture is a vast contributor to greenhouse gases, besides all the water problems, environment pollution, etc. And you have in Minnesota, you have major food companies, General Mills, Cargill, Hormel, and what's happening. And I don't think we're really accounting very well for what's happening. To give me an example, do you happen to know the Midwest Row Crop Collaborative?
I
You know
didn't
what
hear
that
that.
is,
No
Doc?
crop, what?
Midwest Row Crop Collaborative.
No, I'm not familiar.
It's like the 9 Midwest states down to Mississippi trying to do something about this. It includes Cargill and Bayer and National Defense Fund, blah, blah, blah. Well, here's the progress. In 5 years, they have worked with 723,000 acres. That sounds good. Well, that's out of 125 million in the region,
Yeah, it's very low.
which is 0.0058%. They're calling that progress. Cargill's calling that progress. Minnesota companies are calling that progress. I can go on. I mean, with stuff we're trying to do in Minnesota that really isn't achieving a whole hell of a lot. But, I mean, our governor's from a agriculture reason. So point is there's not really accountability going on, and all these goals and everything else, including in the state plans, climate change plans, that are kind of going back to the same model. So I wanted to make that statement. So it's very important for knowledgeable people to take action. The other thing I want to ask you is, what do you think of the whole carbon credit scheme for carbon sequestration? I understand all that, but is it really manifesting in change and results?
Well, my personal opinion is I'm all for carbon credits for the farmers, but I'm not so much pleased with the greenwashing by the corporate people, because they're not reducing their greenhouse gas emissions internally. They're just using it as an offset. But farmers love it. And I think there's more than 1 million. There are hundreds of producers currently doing RA practices that encourage their farmers to take credits. But there's a mismatch. And the problem is they don't have what's MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification standards in place through the USDA or any standard that's acceptable that they all can use. And the other problem is the people that want to participate, if they've already done some RA practices, they may not qualify for any of the carbon programs, because they want new participants. But personally, I think it's great, gives them money, but we need to put fines or fees or whatever on the actual producers to make them stop emitting their greenhouse gases internally. Okay, Anna, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. So, is regenerative agriculture consistent with our current system of mega farms and corporate farms? Or if not, what would future farms look like?
Well, they're not part of the industrial conventional farming today. They're all run, and they abide by the big ag companies to use inputs, fertilizers, seeds, pesticides. The problem is our farmers, they don't do what their great-grandfathers did. They don't farm and protect the soil like they should. And what they've done over the last 50 years is basically sterilized all the dirt. If you don't at least cover the crops, we can't sequester any carbon. We get dust storms again. We've had some damage, and people died of dust storms in the spring when they're getting ready to plant. They cover the highways and people crash into each other down in southern Illinois. Those dust storms are coming back. And so they've gotten away. Even the farmers back in the 30s, when the dust storms were around, they planted all those trees to stop it, which did help. They've tore down those trees and they've converted it to farming. But the destructive practices on the large farmers around the world are coming from deforestation. We have developed a system where the industrial farmers and animal grazers, they've built all these huge CAFOs, which is a whole different subject that we need to stop because they're a big source of the pollution. We don't need them taking the waste from the CAFOs and converting it to methane and burning it. It's just not going to solve our carbon emission. I did want to make one point. Farmers, I didn't really pay attention. The gases that are released by farming is methane, nitrous oxide, not as much CO2. But dramatically, they can reduce the carbon dioxide emissions just by covering the ground and doing the right thing, RA practices. So I just wanted to make that point. But anyways, no, industrial farming, the only way it's going to change is if we stop subsidizing and giving them safety nets that don't change their farming practices. That's the only way it's going to change. Tim?
Okay, in a moment, Anna's going to do an action alert for us. I see she's already put the link in there, but first I have a question for Don. Where is the resistance to regenerative agriculture coming from? Is there much of it, and who is it?
I have another slide I didn't show, but the barriers to adopting regenerative agriculture. It's mostly peer pressure and no incentives, no money to do it. The money that is available to go into large factory industrial farmers, and we have too much emphasis on using our tax dollars to subsidize. The farmer income today, especially lower level farmers, 30 to 40% of it is coming from our tax dollars. They're not making it off farming because the cost of the inputs is too large. The cost of inputs have risen 6 times since 1950. The raise is about the same amount of crops. The yields haven't improved that much. We need to get away. It's a whole different way of farming, and it's gonna, I think, have to be government driven.
Okay, thank you. Don, would it be okay with you if we did our action alert and maybe come back in
Yep.
about 3 minutes?
No, I'm through. Go ahead.
Anna, want to take the lead there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this month's action alert is to support farmers and a more resilient food system. And specifically, Climate Reality has a quick action that you can take to write letters to your senators and congresspeople about supporting regenerative agriculture and specifically keeping money in the Farm Bill and the IRA for conservation practices. So I see that Tim just put the action alert in. So click on that link. It'll take you to Climate Reality. Quickly, you can fill out your info and send a letter to your representatives.
Yeah, it's a simple click and send. You put your name and email address and say click.
Yeah, it should take a minute. Cool.
And while we're doing that, if someone else has a question for Don, go ahead.
While I'm waiting, I'm actually looking at, I have another action alert I'm going to bring up. I can explain it in a minute. Here we go. I'm going to put this link in if you can hear me. I have found a new advocacy platform. Here we go. It's called Action Network. Let me put this in here. It works just like the action alert you just put out. Paste. Here we go. That should work. Let's see. You can click on that. I find we have, as you know, Climate Action Network, CAN, for mobile users. This I put together just recently. It'll do the same thing, and you will have, you can add to it, and it'll go to your member of Congress. I just wanted to mention that if you go on actionnetwork.com, you can sign up for a free advocacy program and do your own letter campaigns. I discussed that a little bit at our meeting today. I created this one, and it allows you to send it to anyone you want, put it on social media, but it does the same thing and it's free. So just for your information, we're going to be using it a lot to reach. It's a web-based platform versus a mobile app platform.
Okay, we've reached the 1 hour mark, but Don, if you're willing, we got a couple more questions.
Well, I'm here forever.
Okay.
You want me to call on the ones who have raised hands? On top right is Tammy. You have a question, Tammy?
Yes, actually, it's kind of plays off of Tim's question, regarding the resistance. What is the, time and effort change for farmers to make these changes? Because when I think about it, to me, it's like, why would they not want to do it? Because it's going to be less time and effort for them. Is that a true statement? Can you comment on that?
Well, everything back in the USDA, one of the leaders in that group, they decided to focus on yields. And when farmers focused on yields, they got indebted, borrowing money to plant, thousands of dollars worth of crops. And in order to get the money back, they had to have a specific yield. So these farmers are heavily in debt when they plant their crops. They need high yields to get that money to pay off their debts. And if they have bad weather, which they're getting now, extreme weather, then they have to rely on safety nets, which our tax dollars are saving them. So the problem is it takes 3 years, roughly 3 to 5, to completely convert from traditional conventional farming to regenerative agriculture. So even those who have done it over the last 20 years say you got to start small. And but this pace is so slow, it's not allowing us to reduce the emissions that are happening today in order to reach net zero. So the extreme environmental conditions are going to get worse. Matter of fact, in last year in Iowa, thousands of acres of crops dried up in the field from the heat. They couldn't grow. It's going to get worse. And but the big selling point of this is even if you lose 30% of your yield, you get 70 to 300% more in profits. Farmers don't understand that yet. Because they're not paying for all that fertilizer, they are making money, and that reduces their stress level. But right now, all the efforts is on large farming, and they have millions of dollars in debt they got to pay at the end of each crop season. So it's just not going to be something that can be done unless we get more money from the government. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yep. Thank you.
All right. Gary, you have a question?
Yeah, I think I understand what you've talked about with the 3-year transition, and I understand the incentives area, at least generally. You talked about stopping industrial farming practices. In relationship to everything that you talked about, I started thinking about, when you go to the grocery store, and you have a choice of eggs to buy. And you can buy organic eggs with chickens that are free range, or you can buy cheaper eggs that are really coming from, I guess, what you would call industrial practices. So there's this problem coming into play with the people. A majority of the people are trying to live on whatever money they have, whatever amount of compensation they have in their lives to fund themselves with housing, with eating, with energy, with everything. There's still going to be a fight, a problem with if the organic and regenerative practices produce things that are sold at higher prices than what's produced by industrial practices. So how does that, I'm not sure if I'm being very coherent here, but.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. I got two answers to that.
Okay, go ahead, please.
You need to pick at least one food item and start the process, because that's where the farmers are going to be supported. One of the biggest problems we have, even though it may cost a little more, it's better for you. The reason is up to 50% of the nutritional value from industrial raised crops has been lost over the last 50 years. And that is creating a lot of diseases. All those pesticides and herbicides that are on the food that we eat. The only way you can eliminate that for your own health is to spend a little more money and get organic or regenerative grown products. One of the things that happened during the pandemic, which showed a big loophole, is we have invested, one, we wanted farmers to have high yields, and then we encouraged it all to be imported and exported. So the food distribution system moved away from the urban centers. There's no food supply. During the pandemic, you couldn't get real raised food from a local market. So one of the emphasis in the Farm Bill is to create distribution networks that are nearer to the farm to the city, whatever it takes, urban farming, to bring the food sources back the way it was in my grandfather's day. You could go to the local food market, get organically grown food. You might pay a little more, but your health is going to benefit. So those are the two reasons I do it. I started my process by just getting organically grown milk. And then I also try to cut down some of the meat products. That would help a lot too. So really, it basically supply and demand. If more of us buy more of that food, that price will get lower because more farmers will be producing.
Okay, well, a follow-up here. Yes, ultimately prices will come down, but the problem is not everybody is advantaged or privileged the way I am fortunate enough to be. So I can choose to buy the healthier product, the product coming out of perhaps regenerative practices, but there's a lot of people that they're just going to need to buy whatever is least expensive.
I'll give you an example on that, as that's where the SNAP program comes in. 76% of all the dollars in the food farm bill is into the SNAP program. That's feeding underprivileged kids at school. As long as the states and the government says it has to be nutritionally high yield nutritional food that comes from these type of RA farmers, that would really support those farmers that need it the most. And those people who are disadvantaged, at least, especially our kids, get nutritional food through the SNAP.
Agreed. If we put those sorts of channels in place, yes, I understand what you're saying.
It depends on, you got to vote for the right member of Congress. So that's my answer to that one. Anyways, I think we've used up all your time, Tim.
Thank you.
All right. All right. I have a question.
Sure, Robert.
Don, first of all, wonderful presentation. I'm just generally going to borrow from your slide presentation.
No problem.
That was excellent. But I have a question, just digging deeper into the Farm Bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, that is a slippery slope, it seems, for regenerative agriculture. What could we do, or our Congress folks do, to make sure that RA is fairly represented in the new version of the 2023 Farm Bill, or what was presented? I mean, I don't see a lot in there for RA.
It's a real fight, and it's going to continue to be a fight. We're trying to support Debbie Stabenow, the senator's request to get as many success stories to the moderate Republicans that will vote on adding friendly policies to the Farm Bill. That's important. The IRA, by the way, has $20 billion. I think there's $16 billion left, but there is a new proposal on the table. The Republicans want to take all that money and use it in conservation title or commodity title, but they don't want to add any of the climate friendly stuff. If we can get some of those moderate Republicans, we only need a dozen. You get all the Democrats, dozen Republicans, you can get whatever you want in that House bill. That's why it's so close. If we can convince enough of the Republicans to switch sides and vote for some climate policies that are friendly and use that money, Debbie Stabenow is proposing that you take, right now the Farm Bill IRA lasts only 5 years or more. It's like $1 billion this year, $1 billion next year, then it jumps to 3, then it goes down. It's all used up within 10 years. But the proposal on the table is to take all that money in the appropriation budget. They decided they could stretch it out, $1 billion a year for the next 20 to 30 to 40 years. That is a good compromise. The only problem is the Republicans still don't want to have climate smart policies in it.
Okay, very quick follow-up. it has to do something with what Tim Nolan earlier alluded to regarding carbon credits. I think that that's the angle that you can get the relatively moderate, I'll call them Republicans, to agree. If they see in the Inflation Reduction Act some current income source for them just by doing cover crops or making moderate changes, I believe they'll do it.
They will do,
Yeah.
they will support that, and they support the Cover Crop Act currently as well.
Okay.
Good
All
idea.
right.
Just got to convince them to vote, to keep the climate friendly policies as part of that money. That's all we need.
Okay.
That'll help a lot. Oh, I just want to point out, I read something today. The government has funded $400+ billion for climate mitigation through the energy market, through the transportation market, but only 43 billion for the agriculture market. It's gotta change.
Okay.
Anyways, that's my spiel. That's what I'm
Yeah.
doing. You're all invited to come to one of our coalition meetings on a Thursday and hear what we're doing. We're still focused on contacting those moderate Republicans and or the Ag House and Senate committee members to vote on climate friendly, climate smart policies.
Everyone's welcome to leave at this point or stick around longer. I'll keep it open for chat, but no one's obligated to stay any further. So thanks, everyone.
And thank you,
thank
and I'll
you.
get back. I'm saving the chat. I'll get back if anyone asks a question I didn't get to. I can put out some more links, but if you need more information on a specific title, we keep very good resources on our Google Drive folder in Chicago.
Don, can we share your slides or are they your own? Or
Oh, I gave them
Don,
to you.
thanks a lot. We
I
appreciate
gave
it
them
on
to
short
you.
notice.
You can download them and change them and do whatever. I mean, I borrowed those too, so you're more than
Yeah,
welcome.
you recite this stuff in your sleep, I know.
I even copied the ones on the Climate Underground. I hope you had an
Yeah.
opportunity to see those.
We'll have to have another
And by the
session.
way, if you want more information, especially you, Robert, you should take the boot camp. That's
Okay.
free. And
I'll do it.
it's immersive, but it has a lot of information.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll have a future discussion on the whole biofuels thing.
Hey, you know, I can tell you about algae bioreactors. There
Yeah,
you go. That's a good one.
okay.
Okay. We're gonna need it.
Take care.
All right, thank you, everybody. I'll leave so you guys can discuss what you want. Bye. Thank you,
okay,
everybody.
thanks, Don.
Thank you.